Alright, ladies and gents, I'm meeting Ja, who, if you remember, was our first podcast guest on the channel. And we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna talk about startups, we're gonna talk about technology, we're gonna brainstorm a bit, have fun, have dinner. I'll tag you along in the journey. We're gonna be heading to Cambridge tomorrow, which will entail a podcast session with one of his friends, Ankuj, who is a startup founder. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to introduce you to another friend of mine, which you'll see in a couple of seconds. Peace.
Hello, my friend.
How are you?
Welcome.
Man? Thank you. It's been a trip.
How was your trip?
Quite long. 2 hours.
2 hours. Look who it is.
Wow.
Look who it is.
I see this guy. Who is that? The friendliest cat down. Alright, so we're quite close now, right, John?
Very close. 9 minutes.
9 minutes away to Ankuj's place. We're gonna have a podcast. My friend Ja. Any message to the fans?
Stay tuned for
Stay tuned.
a very invigorating conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ankuj's is very kind to make lunch for us, so thank you for that. Yeah, we're gonna talk about so many different things, from AI, startup, tech, data science, basically everything that kind of current right now. And this is also my first time in Oxford,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
yeah, stay tuned. Cool, so today is a special episode for the podcast. We have two guests, as you can see. We have Ankuj and Ja, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Let's start with Ankuj.
Well, thanks, Jonathan, for having me on the podcast. Really excited to be here. Short and sweet. My name's Ankuj. I've been a data scientist and an entrepreneur for most of my professional life, and excited to be here.
Oh, that's fine. That's good. Ja, go ahead. What's your background? Technically you were my first podcast guest.
Yes.
For the ones who haven't seen you.
Thank you for having me back. It's really nice to be here, and in person as well.
Yeah.
Filming an in-person three-way conversation.
Yeah.
I'm a performance marketer. I've been doing this for like 12 years, mostly in paid media. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much me. I've worked with all sorts of brands and agencies, in ad tech, in-house, coming up soon. So yeah, very excited to be here.
So I think what's going to make this podcast very interesting is that I guess the unifying theme is we're all same interested in AI, tech, I guess marketing, as well. So let's kind of start with the obvious. So I'm sure just going to be the main focus of the podcast, but we'll obviously divert where needed. What's your background and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I guess it would be cool to say that I was a visionary, and in school I always saw that intelligence was the next big thing in the world. But I guess in reality, when I was at university, I was more largely like studying like data science in the space of its application to what at the time seemed like a hot topic around the semantic web, which is how can intelligence be able to interconnect all the pieces of information that are around in the world, and how like one question can really be like answered to by like web of information coming from many different sources, and then piling intelligence on top of it. So I guess my sort of segue into let's say AI was the promise of unifying the web and being able to provide knowledge to people as opposed to information that we have today. Mm-hmm. That obviously didn't play out the way it was envisioned to, but then as things are within the AI world, there are many different streams of pockets of places where people are doing incredible things, and at the time its application into computer vision or processing of language was a potential that was unlocked through hardware breakthroughs and otherwise, and I was one of the first people to be lucky to use that in my dissertation, which was in the space of cognitive robotics, but using machine learning as a means to that end. And that meant that I had luckily had a front row seat to use what was then a bleeding edge technology to solve a very real problem. And since then, I could never get away from it. It became more and more interesting. The applications grew wider and wider. The potential grew wider and wider. And for the past 2 years, it's just been blazing. So it's been an incredible ride. But yeah, I mean, that's it started off maybe 7 to 8 years back with the simple idea of hey, what can this do to bring knowledge to real world questions, and kind of here we are today, answering a lot more than that.
Prior to university, were you very interested in engineering and technical stuff, or?
I guess so. So I mean, I guess maybe it's what now feels as a very different paradigm. I sometimes like to think of the world as this sort of new world order that started 2 years back with the explosion of ChatGPT and everything associated to that, and maybe a couple of years before that, which was maybe the sort of AI summer, quote unquote, the AI summer around 2016 to 2017 or 2015 to 2017, where a lot of these technologies got unlocked because of hardware improvements or GPUs that the Nvidia and many other such companies brought into the picture. So in those two different worlds, the whole idea of AI or data scientists have been very different in how people drew themselves to fulfill those roles. So back in the day when I was still in university, most of us, like you said, were largely studying software engineering, and then data science or AI was one stream in that sort of mix of things, in that sort of armory of tricks and of magic tricks or otherwise. Now I guess you see that ground up, there are many most universities now offer AI and data science specialties, very much focused on developing these skills from a very early age. So I guess it's a very different paradigm from that perspective. And I guess I was maybe more of the classical ones as a software engineer who grew to become more of a data scientist, right. And now maybe and kind of an AI entrepreneur to a large extent.
Yeah, I think that complements what you're building now, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. So you have a technical background, you're interested in tech, and then now data science is evolving. AI is kind of like a branch of data science. It's not data science. AI is kind of just a segment of it, right?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because I guess people you can view that from many different viewpoints, and people will you'd see many different definitions from different people. I guess some people might, like you said, might view one as a subset of the other. Some of them view these as interchangeable to a large extent, but I guess broadly the definition of intelligence as something that individual people or everyday people can tap into to enrich their lives, and how you can get there is what is largely the sort of the overarching definition I'd sort of like to go with in most cases, wherein these AI, data science, whatever you like to call it, are kind of interchangeable from that perspective. But intelligence as a knowledge source to some extent that is universal and accessible is at the end of the day the sort of the end to which all of these AI or data science, whatever you like to call it, is a means to sort of achieve. That probably doesn't entirely answer your question. Maybe this confuses it a bit more, but that's
I guess it depends on the person looking at the subject, data science, how it's defined.
Right. So I guess if you come from a technical background, then maybe data science is a more let's say, natural work to like sort of progress towards. If your stream of educational is maybe from a different field, then AI is probably your go-to word. So that's the reason why I think, like, depending on the context that you're coming from, your definition might slightly change. But at the end of the day, what these tools achieve is largely the same. Now you can define them in many different ways, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people think of AI, at least the layperson, they're thinking of like the agent that can answer your questions or have a conversation with you, right? And it seems to me that you can do some of the data science practical things just by doing that. So I guess in a way, data science is like a subset of whatever AI is now.
It is too. I mean, to a large extent, yes. And like, much like you said, the tools that we use on a daily basis kind of abstract away the data science piece that kind of, is kind of the plumbing underneath under the hood.
Yeah.
So much like you said, maybe the go-to or the more the term that you can much easier sort of like associate yourself with can be like AI, or very simply like like a chatbot,
right, or
an agent, or and these definitions might also be slightly varying in what they maybe mean under the hood. But at the end of the day, they all they look to achieve the same mean, which is giving you a straightforward answer,
right,
and in a lot of cases, a lot more now than what you were hoping to learn from it.
I became aware of OpenAI's ChatGPT in November 2022, I believe, so Q4 of that year. Obviously, data science wasn't even a term that I was aware of, really. I know data analyst, but data science was new to me at the time. How did you respond to OpenAI kind of being publicly available? Was it a good thing? Were you excited about it? Were you like, oh, it's going to potentially replace a lot of the stuff that I do? Or were you expecting it to kind of come about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like in most of these technologies, much like you said, have become like quote unquote mainstream in the past few years, but like the real I would say the advent of AI as a concept started in way much earlier in the 1940s, and like what the fruits of that labor are what we see today. It's largely been accelerated, like significantly accelerated over the past 10 years, and become something that can easily be used by anybody, anywhere, in any context, really, which is the most amazing piece of it, and which I hope and assume is the reason that we build all these technologies to make lives easier. But like the way these started were like in the very crude form, easily like 60 to 80 odd years ago, and have only become, let's say, more consumable over the past 2 years. But really all of this, like all the movement under the hood has been happening maybe for a good 10 years, sort of before that as well. Right. Much like you said, maybe in the past, sort of like I think OpenAI were probably formed somewhere around 2017, 2018. So they've been doing a lot of work since then. Most of their stories are in and around like billions of dollars being poured into a ton of models that never worked. But a lot of learnings that came from that, improving that, to eventually getting to a point where it suddenly you woke up and the world was a very different place. So like I guess what maybe took everyone, at least like maybe practitioners such as myself, by surprise is the speed at which it happened. But like I think everybody maybe knew that it was coming. Nobody knew when it was coming. But I think it's I guess just the sort of the how quickly the change happened is what maybe has taken everybody by surprise overall. But it has probably been very much in the making for several decades now.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess a very cliche question related to how quickly it's developed. I guess it's more of the Terminator question How long until Skynet's kind of scenario?
It's already here, man.
Or do you think?
Well, I was trying to dress up as one.
Oh, okay.
Let me. I asked if I should dress up like as one.
I thought something was wrong. But I mean, do you think that kind of scenario is firstly possible? And if it is, how far away are we from, say, like machine-controlled everything?
Oh man.
That's like, I'm guessing like you guys. I mean, in myself included, we get these questions on a daily basis.
Right.
We respond to them, or we try to respond to them on a daily basis.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. But the way I like to think about it was kind of what we were discussing earlier, is that I think now I can safely say, with the three of us on this table, that none of our jobs would have existed maybe 20, 30 years ago. What we have like as a profession only exists because of what you termed as our endless curiosity to build better products and services that make our lives easier. And so far through our history, we've though it's been controversial at times, we've somehow ended up making the right choice. Sometimes it's been one step forward, two steps back, but like if you look at it from a longer perspective, we've hopefully made the enough right choices to get us to this point. So I mean, if you think of AI as using past patterns as a way to define what might come in the future, or as your next token or your next prediction, I like to hope, and I mean, I'm confident that we'll be able to continue making the right choices moving forward.
Right.
But at the same time, the world, I mean, was very different 10 years ago. I mean, at least I know that my job didn't exist as a data scientist before any of this happened. Nobody knew when I became one. Nobody knew what that was. I didn't even know what that was. We were mostly just building stuff. Like we get hired in my very first jobs. I would get hired into startups or like bigger companies who had then their only spec was that we have tons of data. We don't know what to do with it.
Right.
I was like, what makes you think that I know what to do with it? But we sort of figured that out together, and that's still somehow where we are in a lot of cases.
Yes, definitely.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So basically where we were in terms of how do we make sense of this hasn't changed a lot from over these years. It's only that we have now and more powerful tools to answer the same questions that we still had back then.
Right.
But maybe coming back to your question, I mean, the world will be very different in the next 5 years. I don't even know if what I do will stay the same. It is very unlikely to. But at the same time, I'm confident of the fact that these tools are making my life personally as a data scientist a lot easier already. Before you guys came in, I was coding on a different project, and if I were still doing this maybe a couple of years back, I probably would be neck deep, deep night coding into stuff, drinking Red Bulls, trying to get specs across to clients. But now because the possibility that we can leverage tools like these to accelerate a lot of what we think and bring them to our daily lives and make them simpler and faster means that I'm lucky to be able to sit with you guys and talk like this. So there's a direct impact that I can personally feel using AI assistants, coding assistants, marketing assistants, and otherwise in my life. And and it's in the future it'll continue being the same. Maybe the job of a data scientist may not exist in the next 5 years. I'm no one to say that it may not, but it might become something else, and I'm kind of open to that possibility. Because much like we were talking earlier, if we were not living in the internet age, we would still be tilling and plowing. And with a body like this, you cannot. I mean, I couldn't till a plow or anything anywhere. So I'm grateful for these tools and hopeful that we continue using them in the right way.
Yeah. I think double clicking on what Ja was asking, I'm going to take it maybe to a different different road, let's say, because you understand, I guess, the back end of what makes an AI or an LLM work, does it kind of get to a point where it has its own consciousness, that it can think for itself, and the word consciousness is quite, you can kind of speculate what it means, and it could be different meanings to different people, but can it, in theory, kind of be its own being? That makes sense.
I knew you were going to ask that.
Well done for double clicking on that one.
Because the reason why I asked that is because, okay, let's say us humans, and again, I'm not an expert, I'm just coming from a place of curiosity. A lot of the way we think, and you can kind of expand on this as well, we're very much, when we think about things, there is already an input that's programmed it to maybe think or react that way, so it was a lot kind of programmed into our DNA or way of thinking, which kind of makes me think of AI, which is kind of inputs, logics for a specific output. So I guess what is consciousness, and can AI have consciousness, or maybe it already has?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not gonna lie to you, and say that I have a clear answer to that. The reason why I don't have a clear answer to that is because kind of what you alluded to is that the idea of what a consciousness means can mean very different things in our current context. So if the question, maybe one way to think about it, the way that I like to think about it, is that whatever you use LLMs for today is a kind of a manifestation of everything we have digitized in the world, and whatever we are asking that digitized version of the world for a response to our question. If that's your definition of consciousness, my question is that the best definition of consciousness? Simply because we, as humanity, or as a civilization, we've been around for a little longer than the past 50, 60 years. So what we've evolved to as a consciousness, so this past, whatever you call it, half a century, is a blip on that radar. It's a pretty significant blip for what we've been able to do, but it is still a blip on the radar from what we've evolved to as a consciousness. So can you get an AI to do stuff that it hasn't been fed a digitized version of the world to respond to? I don't, for right now, no. Can it eventually get there? Depends on whether you can bring other elements into play to give it that level of what you call it, a cognition, if you like. So what we are as maybe the difference between us and these of machines is our cognitive abilities to assimilate, think, decide, and execute, and that has happened over millions and millions of centuries. So we didn't didn't end up here in this particular way. Can a machine be able to do all of that? Not today, but can it eventually get there? With the current version of let's say an LLM, probably not, because at the end of the day, as amazing as it is still a question answer machine for the digital representation of our world. It will take a lot more for this to evolve to a cognition machine, wherein it can think, it can respond to real world signals, assimilate that information, decide on the spot, and execute in the scenarios that we do on at a millisecond basis as human beings through our entire day, through our entire months, or our entire lives. So in the long run, I don't know, I probably won't be around till then to be able to answer that question, but purely from a technology standpoint, I take cognition is something is what makes us human beings, and that's something that we've developed over billions of years, And somehow I find it hard to believe, though won't completely rule out because I'm still a data scientist, is that you can get a machine to be able to replicate that through like 50 years of digitized, let's say, blog, much training modules on blogs and basically the open web.
Yeah. By the way, feel free to ask us too. I don't want it to feel like interrogation.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Man, this is like it's going to touch upon mysticism and things that.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
To me, like LLM is like we've created a like version 1 of thought process essentially, right? So the human faculty of a thought process, cognition, you could call it. We've essentially, what it seems to me is that we've just isolated that. We've created this faculty, that capability. That is still just a process, right? Yeah, we have cognition. It has taken hundreds or tens of millions of years to evolve too. But it is ultimately just a very complicated process, right? I don't think processes represent consciousness. Consciousness requires, I don't know, you call it awareness, right? Awareness. If you take away your thought process, okay, we're going into meditation territory. It's like, if your thought process stops or slows down, does that make you less conscious, less aware? In fact, it'll probably make you more aware of other aspects of your life, right? Of life itself. So, if we've just created a thought process, simply having that doesn't mean anything really. We've just created a complicated process that we have the computational power to run. I don't know, like, we have other aspects. We have emotions, we have physiology, physicality. If, say, in future we add, I don't know, other faculties to this whole ecosystem that is run by like computational power and electrical energy and whatever, it becomes a different life form, I guess, in a way. At what point is that conscious?
I guess that's a question that probably everybody is trying to.
But I think it's like, it's not at what point that becomes conscious. Is that already sits on consciousness, and at what point does that now function as if it's something that you would recognize as something that is truly autonomous?
Yeah, and I guess much like you said, the idea of something being autonomous and something being conscious are also maybe
not
they're
the
not the same
right.
thing. So, like you said, if you kind of now have let's call it a foundational piece of intelligence, rugged as it is, and if you're trying to build it on capabilities, or like you said, that it can maybe think, move, respond.
Greater input of
exactly
sensory data.
Yeah, exactly. So has some degree of mobility, things like that. At one point, does it become a consciousness? I guess, that's a difficult question. What does Asimov think about that?
It's like we can also take it the other way. Let's say you're a human being. We're pretty sure we're conscious, right?
Yeah.
We can take away bits of ourselves, like we can amputate a few limbs, like we can have an accident, we can have a stroke and, we're paralyzed. That's losing our faculties. But we would never say that the consciousness is gone, right? So we go the other direction and reduce it down to, I don't know, in theory we only have one cell left.
Yeah.
At what point do you say that's conscious or not conscious?
That's true. I guess what you define as an autonomous system, if you take away some freedom or mobility, it is not the same thing as maybe an individual for any like misfortunate reason losing some like critical abilities, but despite that still being able to function and lead a normal life beyond that. So I think that's a great great distinction.
It seems to me that consciousness has nothing to do with functionality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. But what we've created, LLM, is a functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I guess the goal with any like digital system is to serve functions, like you said, take something from point A to B, make it easier, either make it faster, make it cheaper.
Right.
And I guess that's how we look at digital technologies overall.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't, much like you said, we don't build them with any other thought in mind. Well, maybe we do, but most builders are looking for
looking for
ways.
solutions.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for solutions to problems,
Right.
and that's how we view most of these technologies.
Right.
So just from that standpoint, I guess at what point do they develop consciousness? I mean, depends. Maybe like you said, how when you define that you think they are, and whether you would take them to that level of let's say diverse functionality for that to happen. Even with all the functionality, would they actually have consciousness? I don't know. How far away is that? Probably like 20, 25, 30 years maybe?
Right.
Let's get back here 30 years and
Yeah. We'll do version
like a before and after,
episode 2.
Back to the future kind of a thing. I'll come back with my robo butler, and you come back with yours, and then we can ask them. Yeah, you get to argue this one out.
Yeah, your turn.
The seat at the table.
So, taking a few steps back, let's say someone's listening. They're seeing all these news and changes about AI, technology. Kind of, how would you explain what an AI is at the very basic level for someone who's like not technical, someone who's maybe not even aware of ChatGPT? How can they kind of get familiar or start getting familiar with what it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way to think about like AI in general, in its most vibrant form, is a piece of technology that can assimilate or like largely obey 3 or 4 critical steps of much like we were discussing earlier, providing a solution or taking a question and responding to it with an acceptable answer, which is comprehension or understanding the context of any piece of information that's provided to it. Assimilation, which is understanding, like assimilating the context of what's being provided to it, not just the question, but like what's being asked behind that question. Number 3, which is like processing that that information and that contextual understanding of what is needed, and then the last step is executing, which is providing a response to that individual. We do that on a daily basis at a microsecond, like walking from a point A to point B, taking the tram, taking the tube, driving ourselves. These like stimuli response mechanisms are what make us humans, and doing these like over and over again for different tasks is what basically comprises our day. And getting a digital system to be able to do those steps at the same level of accuracy that we do it as human beings is what might bring an artificial system to become an intelligent system. So in essence, an AI is what would comprise all of these 4 steps, if you like, which is assimilation, comprehension, like processing and execution, and doing them over and over again would sort of define a system as artificially intelligent, perhaps.
Now, I want to segue into the marketing space, which me and Ja are quite experienced in. So I'm quite curious about a lot of things about marketing and data science too. So Smartly, if you're a media buyer, listener, watching this video, you would probably would have heard of it. But I guess what's like a one-line explainer of what Smartly does?
I guess the best way to describe Smartly would be a creative automation platform that help advertisers build, execute, and report on digital omnichannel advertising campaigns.
Right. So it's heavy on your experience, because I never actually use it, but I've heard.
I've never used it
Never used it
either,
either.
but it's strong on like creative testing, as I've heard, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess they because of the diversity of channels that it can Smartly can sort of work with. They're very good at sort of ingesting or building ads for many different campaigns, for many different channels, A/B testing them at scale,
Right.
and picking out winners and sort of running with those in the long run.
So what was your role exactly at Smartly, and I guess what were your kind of main responsibilities?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, in full transparency, I started off as the lead data scientist, or the AI lead, if you like, at a company called Adlib.io, who are now they are Smartly Video and Display, but at the time were largely creative automation platform for Google for search and display and predominantly. The company then got acquired by Smartly, and my role in both of those places was working in the space of what we call as creative intelligence. So the best way to think about creative intelligence might be kind of thinking about what advertising means in general, which is trying to get the right story to the right person at the right time. And I guess creative intelligence function was largely functioning on getting an intelligent story piece to the right person at the right time, because without the right story, the right person and the right time don't essentially chain into the whole experience of what you're trying to get to a consumer, and whether they find that story relevant and appealing or not. So creative intelligence were by and large trying to make creative intelligence by using performance signals and bringing those into hypercharging, like A/B testing paradigms, and basically being able to ensure that the creative one was initially relevant to the audiences before being launched, but also continue to stay relevant based on where people were and how they were being targeted. So essentially, A/B testing with the right data-driven signals to feed the creative and sort of ensure that remain relevant to the audience.
That's kind of interesting. So I feel like it's more of an analytics tool than a creative production tool. Am I right in thinking that? Or
do you mean Smartly?
It's just Smartly. I feel like it's more like, because it's trying to show you. I'm kind of thinking a bit from the perspective of the user. I feel like it's more, the value is more in the understanding of the data than creating creative assets. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're kind of right. I mean, now, I guess the platform are quite diverse in what they do.
Yeah, they do.
So people come in at various stages of their entire campaign execution cycle. So some of them might be coming in just to do A/B testing, perhaps, for the A/B testing capabilities. Others might be coming in for DCO needs. But in essence,
what's DCO, sorry?
That's the dynamic creative optimization.
Okay.
So in essence, kind of using creative, or serving the best creative to the right audiences based on certain rule-driven criteria.
Right.
But essentially better targeting with a kind of mixed bag of assets, or creative assets assembled sort of on the fly. So yeah, some of them will be coming mid-flight with those sort of needs. Others will be coming kind of pre-flight with where they had concepts or briefs in hand, and then we're looking to build out the entire campaign. But in its very simple, in essence, it was conceived to help individual marketers who wanted to build out their campaigns from templates, execute them and report them on a full stack solution. That's what it intended to do.
So you're at Adlib, and it got bought by Smartly. what would you say is your key takeaway lessons from, I guess, from a data science perspective, but also transitioning into building your new project now, your new startup, which we'll talk about in the next chapter?
Yes, of course. So like I guess having been kind of what I like to personally call myself as a AI native entrepreneur overall. So I guess the largest part of my journey has been either working for or leading data science functions at startups and scale ups. So being part of an acquisition is a very interesting journey, simply because there are so many pieces. It's a very unique experience in that trying to figure out how one product merges with another to then create a third, if that makes sense. Already sounds very complicated. And then you have a mix of 2,000 people who serve these companies at one end or the other.
I didn't even know they were that huge.
Wow.
Kind
That's
of.
huge,
Yeah, I mean, so it's like at the end of the day, when there are that number of people who serve various functions, and then you're trying to merge that into a sum that's greater than those parts, is as it sounds, a very complicated thing.
Challenge.
But in some way, it's kind of like building a new startup from two startups, except that those are no longer startups.
Right.
So it's, as you might expect, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of creative chaos, I'd say, because like you alluded to earlier, like the very different ICPs are kind of coming together to become like a meta ICP in some way, and then trying to figure out how to serve that to a bigger audience, and doing at the same time, like I really I learned a lot during that experience overall, and I'll always be grateful to AudioNet from AdLib for taking a chance on me for that function, and it also gave me the sort of impetus to work on this new new startup idea, which we're kind of building out into the real world. So I guess none of that would have happened if I hadn't stumbled into the marketing space through this opportunity, with AudioNet, so none of this would have happened. So it's been fascinating as an experience. I'd always be grateful for that. And what we're building right now is something that we're really excited about, and we'll hopefully love to share a little bit with you after the break.
All right, we'll take 5. So let's talk about your startup, which I'm very excited about. What is the name of startup, and give us, I guess, a pitch of what it is.
Yeah, of course. So the startup we're building is called Morphiq. And in essence, Morphiq is a creative performance agent that regenerates underperforming creative for brands and agencies.
I'm assuming you were inspired by your experience at Smartly. Is that where the inspiration came from?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, as we were talking about in the previous segment, when sort of AdLib got acquired by Smartly, and the fact that we were kind of already working in this creative intelligence function, largely basically helping brands and agencies kind of bring data to their creative, so using intelligence to better inform the creative, in a lot of cases when it was when campaigns were live, and then we'd see dips in CPAs or ROAS or otherwise whatever the KPI of the campaign was, and then kind of trying to work back from the data and see what the creative could do better in terms of lifting that sort of performance. So in a lot of cases it would mean using data signals, maybe in a lot of cases working with awesome performance marketers such as yourselves, and then using that to build the creative and push that out to bring it closer to where the audience were in their consumption. So kind of the whole idea of being able to automate that piece in a way is what GenAI came in as a blessing for, because prior to this we were largely doing this by hand, looking at Excel sheets maybe using tools to like change
Still are.
exactly, yeah. Still are, exactly.
My client.
Name them. No, keep your contract. As we were like talking, most of this was being done by hand, and you can imagine like across continents, like locales, and thousands of creators. This was like insanely laborious to do.
Right.
And then Gen AI came in, and this was like, wow, this we can really get it to do the lifting piece in all of this. That was sort of the idea that I had at Smartly. Then as weeks rolled on, that kind of became a slightly bigger vision, in that what we realized, and what's maybe happening now with like the ChatGPT for overseas, is that eventually with the cost of generating that creative would become very, very minimal, and everybody would be able to go on to ChatGPT, write a simple prompt, and generate creatives to activate. But the other end of it, people are still consuming the content with the same or even diminishing attention spans. So you really have a kind of a mismatch there, that now you can infinitely create at very low cost, but people don't spend more time or devote more attention to the content being pushed out there. So how in this new world order that was created maybe 2 years ago, how will brands, one, continue to stay relevant, and two, be able to grow? And if you look at it, the whole paradigm of advertising, which is that getting the right story to the right person at the right time, the right person at the right time are largely gameable media strategies that almost everybody adopts in one way or another, targeting, retargeting, with audiences and otherwise. But it's very much diminishing returns from that perspective. So what that leaves you with is the possibility of ensuring that your story can become more and more relevant to your audiences, i.e. being able to personalize the content at scale. And that's really what the idea of Morphiq hits, which is that can we build smart ads, or ads that can evolve based on these brand signals, performance signals, or the source of signals, and become closer and closer to what the audiences are expecting them to be. That would, one, ensure relevancy, and two, be able to ensure a healthy return for the brands from that story. So in essence, Morphiq was conceived with a very simple idea of quote unquote being able to it was sort of a pun, but being able to morph that content at scale and ensure that stories begin to be relevant to the right person at the right time, but can evolve to become better to the right person at the right time as well. And the idea of becoming an agent was largely a response to how people are, talking to their data at the moment. But like you guys said, you guys are using ChatGPT for writing contracts, asking scripts and things like that. So we're all in some sense talking to this digitalized version of the world, asking questions and getting answers. So people we're kind of in a world where that's the way we consume our insights. And people, when we were building out Morphiq, that's the answer we got. That's how we want to talk to our data. So essentially, that's how Morphiq became a creative performance agent that basically helps hypercharge A/B testing at scale, and personalized content, bringing the right story to the right person at the right time.
Yeah, that's a good pitch.
Yeah, slightly too long.
That's good. So you have all this experience in data science. Obviously, you can probably build, you can code as well, right? Why did you build the SaaS specifically, in marketing? Why not maybe analytics or maybe a different kind of SaaS? Was it low-hanging fruit because your experience at Smartly and AdLib, or is there what's your motivation for this SaaS specifically, or this category?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I guess the easiest way to respond to that is that we try to automate a problem that we had ourselves to begin with, and can we find a way to do this for more people, and can we try and do it at scale? So whether that's sort of like no pun intended, but whether that morphs into a SaaS product or that becomes an agent is very much dependent on like how people choose to consume consume the data that Morphiq generates. Whether it's creatives, today these are creatives, but tomorrow those could be other elements that inform their campaigns better. So I mean, we like to build products and services that help them improve their experience, and SaaS is maybe one way of doing that. We ended up agentic because people are talking to their data, and that's how they wanted to. In our case, they wanted to be able to ask the system about like, hey, how can I improve campaign 1 to 3, or like have the assistant proactively in autopilot sometimes pick out underperforming campaigns and shoot across recommendations on Slack or on the interface. So it was their way of consuming this these insights or these responses, recommendations generated that led us down the agentic paradigm. We actually started off as a browser extension or wanting to become a browser extension. But nobody wanted to buy a browser extension. Eventually, we realized that people what they actually wanted was like simple, like an agentic or like a chatbot like interface, not even prevalently there, but something that can work in the background and maybe like shoot out recommendations on a channel like Slack, or if they don't do something like that, maybe just like a simple chat interface really. So that's how we ended up in that direction. Now, as far as analytics go, like at the end of the day, all these insights are driven by analytics. So it's like the consumers of these outcomes are largely like range from like performance marketers such as yourselves, in some cases media buyers, in other cases like heads of innovation at at brands and agencies, CMOs. So it can very much range from like people who are maybe using these for ideation or like for pitches, or in more like in like hands-on cases actually improving outcomes on campaigns. But the easiest way to be able to serve all of these campaigns was to give them a simple interface that allows them to talk to that data, which they are already doing on a daily basis with a bunch of other tools. So yeah,
I think to me what you just said at the last point was I'll make a point about it later on, but being able to almost understand the data but not having to kind of go over hoops or steps, and kind of just that interaction of you're almost just communicating with a consultant what's happening, and it recommends. I think, to me at least, obviously we'll talk about the features more, but that's the value proposition. It's the time saving thing that we talked about, because I can think about it, I can get the whole data analyst team to try and dissect it, but it's like if I can just ask AI, do it faster, more efficient.
It's basically it is your analytics team giving you the output, basically.
Right. It's like a consultant. It's not just showing the data, which is the value in that.
Right.
You understand.
Like we're only obsessed with analytics because we have to be the ones to analyze it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason, right?
That's a really good point.
Otherwise, why would we care about the analytics?
Yeah. That's true. I guess like much like you said, because we kind of go through that process to sort of like really bring out the fruit of that analytics.
Figure out what to do.
Exactly. So I guess it's the fruit that we're really after.
Yeah.
And the analytics is just a means to do that.
Yeah. I feel like there's that step of the analysis makes you feel like you're doing hard work to get to a result that you're confident in. I feel like with some of these agents, you kind of feel like it gives you a result, or it gives you a recommendation, but maybe you're not so confident on that recommendation because you haven't seen the hard work that went into analyzing it in the first place. Yeah,
I mean, I totally feel you on that one, in that like, because much like you said, we like to reap the rewards of something we've spent maybe blood, sweat, and tears on, so to say. Actually,
it's like verifiable, process that got you there. Whereas this is a black box, so it doesn't tell you how it got there.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess that's maybe why like a lot of these like the agents, ChatGPT in particular, have now started this like chain of reasoning approach, which kind of tells you as the users about how the assistant thinks through things, and like comes to conclusions. So at the end of the day, you can figure out whether that line of thought whether that suits you or not.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like, you know, these tools are still assistants, and that, like, you know, you don't essentially have to use them or those outcomes if you don't agree with them.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like, at least in our case, you know, data scientists, at the end of the day, we kind of use these for coding and whatnot. The outcomes like work perfectly. So it's like it's really insane how perfect they are. So it's like can't contest that. Better than what I could have done, but helps me personally, like, you know, get to that fruits,
right,
you know, a little bit quicker than I would have otherwise. So, but I see where I see where that thought comes from.
I guess if you had an agent where, you know, you can then ask for its workings, if it can provide you with that, then that could add an extra dimension to, like, its value, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess that these days, I guess you can prompt these agents to provide you like a line of reasoning behind what guided a specific decision. And then I guess, you know, we're free to choose at the end of the day whether we agree with that line of reasoning,
right,
or not. In most cases, at least in the ones that like I've probably used it, or like we've used it as a team. Can't argue with it. It does a pretty good job, and these are being fine tuned and improved on a daily basis. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you know, that transparency, and I guess these systems have gone to a point of more transparency, because like, I remember when I started building off like AI native startups, if you like, in back 2017, 2018, there was no visibility into anything that was being like, you know, spit out as a prediction or recommendation. And that was the key challenge with users, in that like they obviously wanted to see why it thought of a certain way. And back then we didn't have the tools to really be able to answer that question. Now we can conclusively, you know, provide that chain of reasoning, which has also helped a lot of people understand why these models are thinking or like moving coming to a certain conclusion.
Right.
So I think that's probably significantly raised their trust in these systems. I mean, they're still not perfect. Let's not forget that this is, as a person like to think of this as the first real block of, let's say, consumable intelligence.
Right.
So it's still very much at its infancy stage, but like for what it can do, I mean, I'm not complaining. I find it pretty fascinating at the end of the day, in terms of the value that it creates.
Yeah. I want to talk about, so going back to Morphiq, what's the situation? Are you kind of funding it yourself? Do you have a co-founder? What's the team breakdown? I guess kind of multiple questions here, but what's the overall situation?
Yeah, so we're largely like a small team as a startup. We are like largely funded through, well, we were lucky to get an innovation grant from Innovate UK sometime last year, which gave us some like the capital to be able to build.
How much was it, if you don't mind me asking?
I can't go into that, unfortunately, because it's kind of running. But happy to share that maybe like offline. But let me say that it's enough to be able to build products and like, you know, iterate that to more viable outcomes. Because at the end of the day, the world that we are in, people are still, you know, getting used to the idea of AI or agents. So it's the needs and the functions are constantly evolving.
Right.
So it gives us some leeway to be able to adapt to that moving sort of environment. So you could say that, like, you know, we're part bootstrapped, part funded by the innovation grants, because the grant doesn't cover everything. Right. It only provides you, like, you know, outcomes, or some amount of capital to deliver on what you basically promised to deliver as part of your proposal. Right. So it's a bit of both, and that might sort of be a segue into your bootstrapping versus like self-funded, funded kind of question. But yeah, I think the best way to describe this is that we're probably a little bit of both at this point in time.
Right.
But yeah.
Can you share some of the details in terms of, do you have to give a certain share of the company to the grant, or I guess not? It doesn't work that way because it's not the VC firm.
Yeah, in this case, luckily, we get to keep our capital structure as it is. So there's no you don't have to share out portion of the company. You do have to deliver on what you promised, and that's very strictly recommended as to deliver on what the grant was essentially meant for. But at the end of the day, it's a mix of both.
Now, the reason why I'm very curious is obviously we want to start something,
yes.
And just kind of to hear another founder's perspective on funding, which we'll get to as well. Yeah, I think it's because I've been in environments where a company was funded seed stage, funded a certain amount, 7 figures, and obviously I don't know the details of how much is given to this investor, this VC firm, but I feel like there's a pressure when it's like, let's say if we build a startup together, us three, right? That locus of control is high and there's a bit more control, whereas maybe another party gets involved, but it's a government grant or a VC firm, I don't know if there's more pressure. So I guess in where you guys are at now, are you kind of looking to focus on building at the moment, reiterating, or are you looking to get more funding, VC firm? What's your kind of position now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in our case, and I guess the whole debate of bootstrapping versus VC backing is a generational old one. But way I personally like to think of it, and having gone through both for various companies, either co-founding or being an early employee of in the past, is that obviously, much like you mentioned, they each come with their upsides and downsides.
Yeah.
The downside of a VC investment is you have to give out control of your company to a certain extent. It also it's best place for growth capital, in the sense that if you have a story that you need to grow faster to more people, then it's a great vehicle. It doesn't help you find a story, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So it's if what you're trying to build hasn't found its place in the world yet, and I think you'll hear, and that's our personal experience too, having been through accelerators such as Entrepreneur First, Antler, VC funding, or
can we talk about that as well?
Yes.
Specifically.
Yes, of course. So it's through all of this, at the end of the day, my personal, takeaway from the entire experience of what might work for some people, might not work for others, is the fact that till you're still looking for your story, it's best to stay nimble. It's best to stay frugal. It's best to keep your ears to the ground. Continue iterating it. Continue talking to your customers. Keep that sort of test and learn closer to where you guys are sort of going. And then when you feel, and you will probably find that at some point, hopefully, which is that the market is telling you that they need more from you. That's when you need capital. That's when you have a story that then needs to reach more people, and then you need the capital to fire along with that. So taking too much money without a story will not help you pull a story out of something that didn't exist before.
Right.
So yeah, that is stay nimble, build product, talk to customers, iterate till you get to that story, and once you get to that story, then that capital will be incredibly valuable for you.
Yeah. When you say story, is that basically product market fit? There's demand for it. That's
exactly.
Okay.
So and I guess the whole idea of product market fit is, it's kind of still a bit of a moving target for different people. But boss talks when you get enough of a signal that more people want what you're building and you can't provide them what they need with your limited capacity. That's when you kind of know that you have something going, so that might translate to product market fit. Yes.
Right. And I guess if you had funding before you got to that point, potentially that capital could like push you in directions where it's not productive.
Yeah, much like you said, and I mean that happens a lot too, unfortunately, because like as a startup founder, much like you guys, you listen to a lot of podcasts where like some founders will be telling you to raise like more than you need, more than you can get. Right. You get more money, don't say no to money. And some others will be telling you, no, bootstrap your way, like work your evenings, work across like aside next to your job, and only move into it when you start getting more than your salary. All of these arguments, the way a generally person like to think about advice is that it generally mostly always comes from a good place, but it's also heavily contextual. So what may have worked in some other cases for somebody else might not necessarily work for you.
Right.
So it's like it's great to get that advice, but try and sort of like translate that into your own context and try to figure out whether that might work for you or not. So it's like in a lot of cases of like friends I know, and we make the same mistake as well, like getting too much money early and then kind of going off and hiring a sales team, and they don't know what to sell or they don't know what to pitch.
Right.
Because the product is still up and coming.
Right.
So that doesn't help anybody. Then you have to fire the sales team. You get somebody
which
else.
is a common thing that happens. A lot of I guess technical founders focus too much on the product. There's a lot of investment there, and the marketing is almost like the last thing you think about.
To some extent, yes. I also in my limited experience, it has sort of a little less to do with whether the founder is commercial or technical or otherwise, but more about the fact that the elements haven't been shaped up enough to go out and start like pitching it at scale.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like if you go out too early with a full-blown sales team, but your product isn't quite there, that doesn't essentially come back and help you iterate that product into like a better place.
Gotcha.
Then sales teams get fired or they get replaced, and then at some point in a lot of cases, unfortunately, the founders get replaced by the board or otherwise because they blew too much capital, and there was there's very little demand for the product.
Right.
So that unfortunately happens a lot, and it's easy to get caught up in the whole frenzy of I thought of the idea last night and like today I'm making like millions and all that kind of stuff that you read and hear about. But like the best piece of advice I got from a very close VC friend of mine was that any story that you hear happened last night actually took place at least 2 years ago.
Right.
But whatever you read in any commercial like snazzy and jazzy tech piece or article is usually a story that would at least start 2 years ago, but that will never get. They will never get the
that's a good point.
Because that's also not the story you would like to hear.
I feel like it's like a PR piece, like getting funding. It's like, hey, and then
all of a sudden we
tech people get your attention.
I'm not saying that doesn't happen to people. I mean, I'm sure it does happen. Like if you build something that instantly caught fire, and like Facebook and things like that did happen in the past. So that for every rule, there is enough of an exception in the startup space that the exception has become the rule, or let's say that the boundary between exception and rule is like constantly changing because there are enough founders who have done like completely wild things and still made incredibly valuable businesses. Nobody thought Liquid Death would ever make it as a WhatsApp brand. Nobody thought that, but look at where we are. So it's like there are enough exceptions out there to make you believe that hey, you know what, anything is doable. I can make anything work. I can make like water sell like hotcakes. And there's evidence for that as well. Right. It's just that it's best in a lot of cases to make place that in your contextual sort of setup and see whether that might be valuable to you or not. And in most cases, being sort of methodical and being a bit nimble till you find your story has worked out a little better for companies in the longer run.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I think you digest that.
No, I guess I'm thinking of like OpenAI. Obviously, they received a lot of funding. They didn't sell a thing until like 2 years ago, basically. And all of that went into developing the products, like tens of billions of dollars. Now, that's obviously a massive amount of funding that you don't see fruition for a very long time, but you still stick with it. And same with Facebook. Like the only like vote of confidence was that it was viral, right? But they didn't have a monetization plan for it for like, I don't know how long, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And Google as well, to be honest. This kind of story seems to happen a lot. But even though I only gave 3 examples.
Well, I mean, that's why I say much. The number of sometimes the number of exceptions in sort of like in terms of the revenue cap or market cap exceeds the market cap of all those who have followed the rules.
Right.
So that might be why it's hard to draw the line.
Yeah.
Like between what's right and what's not. But like some other piece of advice that somebody gave me, or I heard of some time back, which is that like that story of like one kid coding up a social network in their dorm room in 40 days has already happened. That may or may not be your story moving forward.
Yeah.
So it's great to draw inspiration from that, which is that there are tools out there that I can leverage and build the next Facebook. But whether it will turn out the same way or like whether that will manifest the same way is very much your own story, and your story will be different from anybody else's.
But I mean, like the approach to this, say Facebook, they went in. They obviously there was a lot of confidence and many investors who had faith in this whole idea. If we were taking a more cautious route, we might have tried to monetize it as soon as possible, right? And that would have panned out very, very differently. So like, then it's this decision-making thing, right? What is firstly, Facebook, they found product market fit in the sense that people want to use it. They had no idea what the product
I think Zuckerberg
market commercial fit
had the idea.
He probably did. Okay, fair enough. Like everyone knows that if you get eyeballs, you can sell something, event, whatever the hell it is. So it's just a conviction of you speculating on how valuable that is ultimately, right?
Yeah. But I see your point, because for me, maybe I'm more, not that I've built a successful startup, but I'm just kind of seeing it from obviously looking at all these different companies. I'm thinking of profit first, like unit economics.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like when I say profit first, I don't mean how do we monetize this immediately. It's more about thinking about once there's a way to make money from it, how does that work and is it sustainable? Instead of using the technology as the value proposition. I don't know.
It's kind of like you almost only go into it if you can already see it's commercially viable.
Right. I think
you go in with a commercial mind first.
Right. Not being focused on the features.
Not really focusing on is this innovation exciting, valuable, useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But commercial first.
Right. I think so. I think the potential for it to be commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way I would think of it. And maybe I'm a bit biased because I have worked in a company where I would say generally maybe 80%, 90% focus on the product. They were kind of reiterating and like I said, the marketing wasn't too honed in, which makes sense now looking back, because if you're trying to figure out what the product is, the marketing will evolve. You can't really commit to it. So yeah, it's tough, but I think it's actually one of the points I write in my book about trying to find product market fit, or trying to just prove that people will want it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But I guess till I actually build my own tech-based startup, I think look back on this podcast and say it was either right or wrong.
We'll find that out in 30 years when we sit with our own But yeah, kind of what you just mentioned around that, I guess marketing is best placed at amplifying a story. It can't essentially help creating one. So maybe kind of being honest to yourself, knowing whether you have that story yet or not, And at this point in time, most AI startups, at least after 2023, are kind of evolving with this new world order. So like still searching for product market fit. We are also still searching for product market fit. We're like a young company, 12, 15 months old. So it's like from that perspective, what I can see and what we're doing right now is just staying nimble and just trying to listen to what the market are trying to tell us.
Let's talk about maybe lessons you've learned. Obviously, you probably have a lot of lessons you've gone through. We'll talk about Entrepreneur first. It's an accelerator boot camp where they kind of teach you about how to be a startup founder. Maybe talk about that, and then maybe talk about some real hard lessons you've learned that you'd want to share to aspiring tech founders.
Us.
Well, that's not true. You guys are very awesome at what you do. Meditation and otherwise. But yeah, like I guess in my experience, at least over the past couple of years, I think that this advice is probably very contextual because I mostly went to these accelerators like Entrepreneur First and Antler as very much a technical founder who thought he could code up a storm, but didn't really understand what value meant or how people consume products and services.
By the way, sorry to interrupt you. Did you? Because I'm Entrepreneur First. The point is to kind of find a co-founder, right?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Or was that your intention?
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of went in because I was like a solo person,
right,
trying to figure out how to build a new company,
mm-hmm.
And Entrepreneur First is a great place to find like-minded people.
Did you find a co-founder there?
Yes. We did find a co-founder for some time, and then we beyond a certain point we had divergent interests.
Right.
And then we thought it was best to call it a day, and then maybe move on with our lives. But Bootstrap, I think it's a great place to go and meet like-minded people who are looking for the same outcomes you are, right, which in life can be very difficult.
What happens if it's? I guess if we're non-tech, we can't.
Oh yes, you can absolutely. So it's technical, non-technical, both categories are
right.
So they look for an equal fit between an equal balance on the core for both of them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are let's be a bit more specific. What would be the top 3 lessons you've learned at Entrepreneur First, and I guess the other accelerator / boot camps you've been a part of?
I think so I'll go into I'll try and condense all my learnings into pros and cons and try to condense those into 3 points, 3 or 4 perhaps. So I guess the good things. One we're talking, great place to find a co-founder, great place to find like-minded individuals who are looking for the same outcomes as yourself. Great launch pad from that perspective because it helps you kind of understand how to test and learn back into the marketing space generally, test different ideas, iterate them very quickly, and then they hit upon something hopefully that becomes valuable or that is deemed valuable. And so these frameworks provide you a very quicker way to sort of get there. You may get there on your own outside in the real world, but it might just take longer. Might be doing it over the evenings or whatever stuff like that. So it'll just happen much quicker, and you kind of an entrepreneur in residence. So you get a little bit of a stipend during that period, so you don't have to worry about salary. So you're relatively covered. You just have to focus on finding an idea that
money goes quite quickly though. Realistically, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, if you get if you get funded by them in their investment committee, that money is typically meant as a kind of a first investment vehicle. Right. So it sort of helps you get to your next round of funding. It's meant to be that first kick, first check in the bank.
And in terms of the agreement, are they comfortable if you still do consulting on the side, or they want you to fully commit to this project? Is that?
So if they fund you, I think it's part of the contract, and it's not very how would I put it? You'd see from their perspective that they're funding the possibility that you will that they can back you to become a valuable company in the future. That in most cases can happen if you kind of, and you guys would know this better than I do, it takes more than 200% of your time to like really get something valuable out into the real world. So if you're splitting your time, you're also reducing your chances of creating something valuable. And the second piece is that, if they're backing you, like, they're covering that, the sort of the salary piece, so you don't have to worry about it. I honestly don't know if you can consult on the side or not. In our cohorts, we never had. Well, we had people who were becoming our contracts, so there was maybe some degree of overlap because you have to quit your job to get into these.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so you have to quit your job and go into this for like 3 months or 3 to 6 months or whatever that period is.
Right.
But they cover you with the salary for that period. But obviously the downside is that you kind of have to leave your job. But that's sort of it's like you have to make up your mind.
I guess they're taking a risk. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Which you're kind of doing as an entrepreneur. So they're investing in your ability, that you made a strong decision.
Right.
So really give this everything.
Commitment.
So it works. That's the way that sort of handshake works.
Right.
So it's like that's maybe one of the downsides as well, which is like if you have a very good job that you don't want to give up, you're not really sure whether you want this.
Right.
Many people, I can totally understand why they would not want to go into something like this.
They might have a family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Need to support. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So so in that case, it becomes. It's not viable for them as a decision.
Right.
But if you made up your mind that I really want to go for this, I have it's giving me enough of a little bit of a that it's covering my bases for a few months, and then we'll see. Maybe I can hopefully go back to my old job, because in a lot of cases what also happens is that on employers they value the fact that you have that risk taking ability in you, so you often go back. One, as somebody who has learned a lot more about themselves, because during this period you also learn, and that's one of the other good things I was hoping to touch upon, which is that you and maybe we're talking about this like offline, which is that you learn a lot about yourself as well during this process, which is that who are you, who you are, what you like, what you don't like, and what you can essentially bring value that can be deemed as value.
And your co-founder too, because it's kind of like a marriage.
Exactly, it is exactly because you'll be. If everything hopefully works out, you'll be together for a couple of years, and hopefully, and maybe spending weekends, nights, and stuff like that together. So
just the thing that we talk about offline, I'm scared that if we, I think I'll get intense and it's a relationship, it's a commitment. But anyway,
but I guess we all get to a point that call it a sweet spot in the relationship where we kind of accept each other for who we are and try to become a little bit a better version of ourselves for the other person. Maybe it's a part of a relationship, and it's the same with co-founders as well. But broad strokes are if you're wondering whether you want to go into something like this, you often end up going back to, and if it doesn't work out for any reason, you still go back to your job as somebody who knows.
It doesn't sound like a bad deal at all.
It sounds
learn a network. It
sounds relatively risk-free, which is an incredible deal, really.
They don't take equity, I'm assuming, or I guess they would.
If they invest in your company, yes, they would.
Right. Okay.
So that is subject to them investing.
Right.
So would you recommend Entrepreneur first, I guess generally? If someone wants to, let's say they're a non-tech founder, they want to maybe find a technical co-founder, they maybe have a few ideas, they're willing to commit 3 months to this, and would you recommend it?
I think so. For all the conditions you just mentioned, if you're really looking to dive into this and you're looking for a co-founder, it's a great place to go and find one.
Right.
It's a great place, and like you said, it is relatively risk-free because your bases are being covered. That they're taking care of that.
Right.
And you can, in most cases, still go back to your old job. In the cases that whenever I went, or the time that I did, or people that I knew in the cohort when. There were rarely cases where the employer would not accept them back.
Right.
So be well, we took a risk, and you're coming back with a lot more learnings. So
those are very nice employers.
Yeah.
But fair, if they didn't see it like that, you probably don't want to work for them.
I don't know if, from my experience, if most employers, they would see it as a threat. Maybe I don't know. But,
I mean, I guess it depends on your
Yeah.
relationship with
But all right. So I guess closing up in I guess in under 2 minutes, talk about so you talk about some of the pros, maybe the negatives of like the accelerator, if there are any.
I guess in general, like accelerators, in my personal opinion, are valuable if like under the conditions that you just mentioned. So like, if you're looking to find a co-founder or like build up a story, it's a great place to be as a first timer. In most cases,
Right.
and that's not true for all accelerators, by the way. There are many others where like like people maybe would keep going back to for like for the value that like there's Y Combinator in America, which is like the best one in the world. I've never heard of anybody saying, "Oh no, I'll never go back." Everybody wants to go there.
Right.
It's like that kind of place. But yeah, like different, accelerators are great for different places in your journey, much like different people are a great hand, sort of like, sort of compatibility. There will be some level of compatibility depending on where you are in your journey.
Right.
So I think in my experience, these the ones that I mentioned are maybe best suited for a certain phase of your journey. And some others are maybe like more like universal. I'd say you can go back to them if you get in, like with places like Y Combinator or whatever. I've never heard of anybody not wanting to go back. So yeah, very much depends on like what you're looking for in these places. If they can provide you what you're looking for, in that case the handshake works out nicely. But if it's not an ideal fit, and I guess that goes for everything in life, you kind of would know that, you would feel that, and then it's up to you to decide whether you'd want to take that up or not.
All right. Cool.
Right.
I'm sold.
Yeah.
We understand what Morphiq is. How would you pitch it to an agency or a client directly? What's your usual buyer persona?
So
when you set it in?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess at the end of the day, like Morphiq works for providing creative performance at scale, in essence, and that ideology works both for brands and both for agencies. Largely, I would say because it provides that kind of like the lifts necessary, the lifts that the creative intelligence like needed to bring value with it at scale. It works for like mid-market performance agencies, D2C e-com brands that really are looking for that kind of boost on their outcomes. Either campaigns that are maybe not doing so well in operation, or they see this as a value add at an activation stage. So it works for both. In terms of an ICP. We mostly work with like individual cool guys such as yourselves, like performance marketers, media buyers, in some cases even graphic designers who are maybe looking for ideation with like data-driven creative. So like the whole idea that that like lifelong creative like performance that is driven by first-party data or like brand data has value and implication both at an when the campaign is in operation, but also for the lifetime of a brand. So when we were discussing about like, hey, how can brands continue to stay relevant, or how can they sort of grow? How do they think about growth? But like I guess it's in a lot of cases it's these nuts and bolts of like ensuring like personalization at scale. But like the learning piece that comes from tuning these AIs to and having them follow campaigns for like longer durations of time through like A/B testing, and using the fruits of that training or teaching it to do better for your brand evolves, like brings lifetime like creative for the brand. So broad strokes in terms of users. it largely helps performance marketers, media buyers, in some cases graphic designers, but largely the idea of like, data-driven creative is the key element that appeals to them, appeals to all of them.
Right. But I guess the main it's really like a tool for growth. It's not it's not specifically designed just for creative production. It's creative production to grow your business. Basically, that's the main pitch.
I think so, yeah, because at the end of the day, like the whole idea of using like your data to making your data work harder for your creative is in this case your creative is valuable as an outcome for like for growth of a current campaign, but the idea that it feeds back all the way to your creatives and helps them inform your designers, and helps them as an ideation tool in terms of, hey, here's something that's worked before, and then they incorporate that into their sort of like design process. Kind of really completes the loop, and often the disconnect between the creative and the media from that perspective, we hear that all the time, that like completely disconnected, completely siloed. So in a lot of cases, the fact that the media buyer brings this back to the creative designer, sometimes in the same room, sometimes not, either through Slack or otherwise, really closes the loop between those two slightly distinct elements. And because you're doing that, in some cases, not even realizing that, the sort of training that you're giving your AI, so this happening over and over and over and over again, is actually improving the outcomes. The more the sort of like the AI sits behind.
I have an interesting proposition, which is I was working with this client, and for most of the client work that I do, I find that the media buying team or performance marketing team and the creative team / designers, it's always a disconnect.
Yeah.
We brief,
big time.
They send it back. They want to know the data. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe I think generally they don't.
They don't. Yeah, they don't really want the details.
This, let's say, client A I worked with, there was an emphasis on wanting for both teams to collaborate more, which is I predict is a thing that will be talked about more. And then maybe a performance marketing creative strategist is in between that to kind of unite the different teams.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I did for this this said client is basically ask my team of performance marketers to basically create a PCA, or like a PowerPoint presentation of brand awareness, what's our best performing ads, in terms of acquisition campaigns, what's our best performing, and then kind of screenshot those ads and then simplify it to present to the creative team who are in-house, which is great. And you would think it's like a seamless thing because you just copy and paste data, but then creating the PowerPoint is easy, but then my team telling that story to creative designers, and then obviously they're not understanding metrics, there's that. So it's like, I'm thinking maybe, well, I'm not saying that you head this way, but just as maybe an idea that Morphiq kind of helping bridge those two teams, I don't know what that looks like, but I think there's value there too.
I think so too. Just like, like a media buyer, they will analyze whatever is happening. They will go back to the creative team with words of what they're thinking.
This is good.
And those words do not translate to a visual representation of what that should turn into. If the media buyer can also be empowered with a set of regenerated creative that the agent thinks would be better, then they go back with a narrative and a visual representation of what the next step might be, which gives the creative team some idea of what they're talking about. That's not just descriptive words. And I think that will probably help bridge the gap somewhat.
Yeah.
Because obviously this regenerated creative is based on the data, right? Based on the performance.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is a hot take, but I think most brands they still want that level of control on the creative side, and I think it's that fear of not knowing what's being there's a black box in that AI creative production. I'm saying, do you get like any friction points like selling it in, or pitching it to potential clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like maybe trying to tie the 2 points that you just mentioned, the way that like, the fact and what you just mentioned, like, media buyers maybe going back to creatives with more than it work, quote unquote, it works, is something which we've experienced in the past, in that like, and that maybe ties into the earlier point around like, hey, black box plus reasoning makes it, trustworthy.
Right.
And the piece that like, and that's kind of ties in to some of the the pushback we had earlier, which is that like, hey, it does this, but why does it do this? How can I trust it? So when we started incorporating like, sort of the reasoning pieces behind it, it made our media buyers a lot more comfortable trying to understand like what happened, and then it gives them the possibility or the way the data for them to take that and make that their own, and take that back, either like push that out directly in a lot of cases, because like in some accounts and in some accounts where we've worked with them for like a more prolonged period of time, where they've been seeing these creatives being produced or like regenerated, and now they're confident of like the quality, the brand piece, safety pieces, everything in place. They're now comfortable in like having these pushed out to line items. So in a lot of cases, and especially it happens more with like accounts or like companies, both brands and agencies, depending on where they are on their AI adoption curve to some extent. So if they're still trying to figure out like what AI is, and like that, and it's very reasonable to be in that to kind of try to get on terms with what it means. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to work with them, have these outcomes being produced, maybe have those sent on Slack or an approval chain or otherwise, and they eventually get to a point where it's like, this is now getting pushed out on a line item directly, and we're fine with that. In a lot of other cases, accounts know exactly what they want, and then they'll come back to you asking for this specific piece or this this specific recommendation, which is why like we've built out the tool to be both that we have to think of it as both like autopilot and like stick at the same time, which is that like the stick function works where like the media buyer maybe needs like some impetus or like some line of reasoning to take back, either for like client meetings, like your weekly meeting with your clients, QBRs, or to take back to like somebody that you need to convince on your chain, and then they're asking the assistant for like, hey, tell me more about this campaign, what can I do to improve it, or like why did it work in this certain way, comes without an output, PDF or otherwise, whatever that may look like, then they take it back and then they sort of run with it. So that's kind of the stick mode. In the auto-target mode, the assistant is basically running in stealth in the background, picking out campaigns that it thinks are underperforming, or that don't meet the requirement that may tank in the future based on predictions, or are not doing well currently, and then give you a recommendation that, hey, this is not doing well for this reason, here's what I recommend as a change, and that gets produced out as an outcome. So broadly to answer your question, I think we've as a business trying to work with a moving target or everything around AI, and like how people react to it, don't trust it in the beginning, need to be need convincing, and then now our point where it gets pushed on as a line item. We've gone through that entire phase, and like that's how we've kind of like come to a point where now like we've got this stick mode and like autopilot mode, if you like, but like that's been sort of the fruit, if you like, of the past 15 months of really working with them day in, day out, testing and learning, getting them, getting it to work really nicely for like a fixed set of prompts that they have, and then responding to their feature requests, asking for more stuff. Some cases it might be too out there. In some cases it's doable, and in both cases, you kind of have to tell them that, this.
If you worked with me, it will be too out.
And I mean, it's not too. I mean, I can totally understand where they come from, because like the way how wild it is at the moment, you think that almost anything is possible. But at the end of the day, like there's still some things which are still like out of reach from what the technology is at this point in time, and it needs that level of transparency. But in the accounts that we work with, we've been able to win the approval or the trust of the client to then maybe convince them to go from stick to autopilot, or in most cases to use both of them depending on their needs. But how do you guys I don't know, I don't know if that's part of the podcast or not, but do you guys work with AI generated creatives in any way, data driven, anything from that perspective? Any tools that you use that?
To be fair, for me personally, is literally the ideation phase that I'm using it for, not the production. Every client I work with have had some in-house or agency production capabilities. So nobody's actually that I've worked with has got to the point where they're using these things very deeply, but they probably should. Because
this is the thing of
production
innovation,
ages,
because it's kind of controversial saying, hey, I've got this idea that potentially you can completely replace our graphic design. So it's I'm talking about just as a marketing person, how would you, and I'm thinking client side, how would you present it?
I'm thinking
knowing that you have an in-house.
I'm thinking all of these things are there to speed up the process.
Yeah.
Speed up the process and basically to generate more volume outputs, right?
Yeah.
The designer still has a place. They need to fix the visual tone and style of it, right? The visual identity.
Right.
And potentially you don't want an AI to just spit out a random set of designs and visual identity for the brand. You want it to be this, that's the boundary condition.
Yeah.
And you want it to work within those confines.
Right, yeah.
So the design team are not going to become obsolete. Their work is just going to be more about guiding what it is. That's how I see it. And then the AI and all of that can do the production. Help with the ideation, refinement, and eventually just creating the asset.
Right.
And then maybe further on it outputs, say, a video.
Yeah.
And then you can just prompt it again, tell it where you need it tweaking or something.
Right, yeah. And I guess you said, maybe a lot of, let's say, ChatGPT tools will now be able to do that bit quite a bit, where a lot of AI can become valuable, moving in the field that we are now, especially with, let's say, like you said, it spits out anything, is being able to hypercharge the A/B testing process, with more data driven outcomes.
Right.
So if you're able to seed this entire A/B testing paradigm with data driven creative, essentially as learning with the audiences, you're essentially doing more with less creative to begin with.
Right.
And then that over multiple phases, let's say we have a picture of ourselves at the moment, and I'll just take a picture, this gets put on the podcast. Let's say one of the viewers is an aspiring maybe entrepreneur. They may want to see maybe elements on the table that reflect that, or that reflect the mental state that they are sort of in.
Right.
And if through a hypercharged, let's say data-driven A/B testing paradigm, you're able to get them those elements in that picture, they're more likely to be drawn to the message that we're trying to convey to them.
Yeah, I like the idea of this. I feel that's very, because you have to I guess work with the ad networks themselves and say, hey, because they would need to be involved, right?
Not necessarily, I would say, because at the end of
they take the audience.
The thing is, obviously,
but you're still getting the signals back from all of this. That's the key piece. Yeah.
I think there is a way to set this up to make it work, but it may not be say the most efficient structure, if you know what I mean. Let's say ad networks and say Meta in future, they allow you to, in this particular scenario, they allow you to set 10 different thumbnails for a particular asset instead of one.
Okay.
This would then allow this to work really well.
Well, I mean,
that's a very specific situation.
It is. I mean, I agree with you. The idea of bringing in, newer creative in a paradigm where it's already running comes with its value, but also comes with its challenges.
Yeah.
The challenge is, but it needs to be plugged in, line item or otherwise. There's maybe a learning curve associated to it. The question that we sort of try to ask ourselves is that scenario still better than a scenario where you can potentially have lesser creatives, sort of maybe like a paradigm where your creatives are being being pushed out or rotated out. Let's say you went in with like 150 of them or whatever, so let's say last campaign or otherwise, and maybe 20% of them were generated using a chat GPT tool or something to that effect, so that there's no level of testing or otherwise, and they are doomed. They're like quote unquote like dead on arrival. So like, would you rather rotate them out and seed the campaign with a data-driven creative, and then have that iterate over a couple of iterations, and then get to a point where your viewer would then be able to see what he's expecting to see when he comes to a thumbnail of your podcast, rather than give them the 20 GPT generated ones that were only done there because they were cheap or otherwise had no reason to be there. Yeah. So like, is that paradigm the paradigm B better than paradigm A? And that's the reason why we've launched what we have. So it makes a personalized outcome, not creepy, but just like personalized outcome, a real possibility for people from that perspective, and allows them to be on the channel.
Potentially a mixture of both paradigms.
Maybe, yes.
Right.
So like in this case, maybe part of your audience are on Spotify, some of them are on YouTube, so they may have very divergent sort of expectations from the from your messaging, or from from what you're producing. So can you get your quote unquote story closer to this like multi-dimensional audience, outside of these ad networks individually, and like can basically an AI help a performance marketer to achieve that outcome.
For some reason, I'm just thinking about YouTube videos and how people upload a video and they test various thumbnails in the first few hours to see which one sticks.
Yeah.
If this could be used for that, it'd be pretty incredible. And also to change the title of the video as well.
Oh yeah.
Man.
I only just tested that feature, the A/B testing feature recently for my last video.
Yeah.
I've got 3 different thumbnails. It's the same with me, but then text is different. Yeah. And it's a 12-day test. It'll finish tomorrow, so we'll kind of see which is higher click-through rate, which is the main metric on YouTube. Yeah, it's quite interesting. A/B testing is such a big topic in itself. Yeah.
It is, yeah, especially if you're kind of omni-channel from that perspective. Yeah. Because much like you said, if maybe one is working on a single channel and you try to optimize for that, then you probably don't need a tool like an omni-channel tool like ours or Smartly or anything else. Yeah. But if your story, like you said, if your brand story is bigger than individual channels, how do you leverage? How do you basically sell a brand across those audiences and continue to ensure that they find that content relevant? So omni-channel is the best place where tools like these maybe provide value from that perspective. Whereas for individual channels, like an ad managers is totally fine. From that perspective.
I can see a problem though. This is because this is just my experience with let's say Meta ad specifically. So you have an ad set, you have some kind of targeting, right? And I guess the way Meta dictates where the budget will go long term is maybe the top 2 or 3, 4 creatives that get you conversions. On paper, that's what the algorithm is meant to do. So let's say that ad set has 10 different creatives, they're all slightly different. What both of you are saying is, or I guess Morphiq, what it does is it will get, let's say, the top 3 creatives and then continually reiterate it for the best performing audience within that ad set. But what if there's a it's hard to kind of articulate this without visualizing it. What if there's an audience pool within that ad set that would have converted if most of the ad spend went onto a different creative, you know? So it's like...
I have a solution for this.
What is this?
So essentially you would cluster the ads into different ad sets and then they could work
okay,
in a
right.
segmented
So
way.
you do it prior
So
to A/B testing.
Each one will have a purpose, like they're very similar, you're just testing different elements of different ways of talking to that audience.
Right, so this goes
Allow
to,
it to pick the best
like
and
this goes to
best.
marketing. This is offer based.
Yeah.
This is a man.
It could be
this is
split,
more
whatever is
emotional.
relevant for.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the best in each one will then get optimized. It's right.
Because how Meta works is like it does its A/B testing, I guess, quite early on. If it finds a winner, pretty much the rest of your creatives are.
It's like they're just doomed.
Yeah, the client will complain.
Yes.
Why is there no spend on these? And then you try to explain, well, the algorithm says that these ads are best performing.
In theory, if you leave it long enough, then those best performing ones will one day fatigue, and then they'll start shifting and then relearning.
Yeah, but generally, at least from my experience, is that the client will always want to say, hey, we spent resources designing these creatives.
Right.
I really want to test out.
You want to see which one is...
Can you pause the best performing creatives? And, it's like... So you're against algorithm, basically. So
You're just like, this one is working, let's pause it. Just because we want to
see what will happen if we put in the worst performing creative.
Well, that's, I guess, if you're...
So, like, this just brings about the question of, like, what is your creative strategy and approach? Like, actually, this is the bit that needs the planning.
Well, this interesting thing about what you were talking about yesterday about, said client is their approach to, if they're not D2C, they should approach it differently. Or if they're, going into direct to consumer, how would they approach brand awareness?
Yeah.
Should they even focus on acquisition or just educate rather than just focus on creatives that convert? Because you might get this where it gets technical now. Your performance might be, these creatives might be really good for acquisition for first-time customers, but then will they come back? The lifetime value of the user on those creatives.
Yeah. Like this, the way you structure it is very important.
Yeah, the strategy is. Yeah.
Like you need to know what the point of all of these things are.
Yeah. Which I doubt most.
What if you
Sorry guys, knocking you out.
I guess if your idea is, let's stop our best performing creative and let's see what happens. That's a tough one to come back from, isn't it?
It's like, why is our revenue dropping? Why is our CPA so high? It's like, we switched. Why did you switch them?
Yeah.
That's a tough strategy to
because you get into this situation so often though. It's like, what do you do about it?
So do you think the future of creative production, I guess zooming up, maybe the future of performance marketing or even marketing in general will be automated from a creative/media asset point of view? Like, we'll just create thumbnails for you, we know what the context, the AI knows the context of the brand, it knows what works best, so it's kind of fully automated. Let's say in the next 10-20 years, like kind of the final version of it. Is that the end thing, you think?
I guess it's tough to know. I mean, honestly speaking, like when I try to think about it overall, like what you guys just described, even when you were discussing whether we should be thinking about the LTV of the customer and whether like awareness, whether like an awareness campaign will increase that, or whether it should be like a conversion campaign that increases that. I find it hard to believe, at least today for where we are, that an AI would be able to work through all of these complicated pieces across different channels and be able to respond to that and automatically run it. So I personally don't think that might be the case. That's why I think that like tools like these, like any sort of AI tools, would be able to like manual or autopilot wise be able to help you talk to your data, like be able to bring all these information across these channels into a singular piece, and either be able to respond to what you need or be able to give you better recommendations if things are not panning out the way you expected it.
So when I was at this working with this client last year, and a founder of I guess it's not like Morphiq, but it's essentially what their value prop is that if you're a brand that's heavy on advertising, have a lot of creatives, they basically have a SaaS that helps you analyze what elements of that creative works best. So this is the conversation we're talking about. It's not all about marketing, isn't all about performance. I think there's value in understanding why. And so this founder was like, so the way it works is we analyze the features of the person, the background, basically everything, and the SaaS explains to you why this creative was the best performing. That's kind of what their it wasn't so much about the performance; it's about the why.
Right.
So
this is sounding a bit like what Morphiq probably tries to do, right? A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to like at the end of the day, and so not to tug it in that direction, but like the idea of kind of understanding the creative, but also marrying it with the audience and improving that creative, quote unquote, like morphing it, is sort of like the inspiration of what we're.
So Morphiq can kind of contextualize this is best performed because of.
Like to be able to pick out features that it thinks caused more likely to be causation of the performance.
Right. Yeah. So like the recommendations it comes up with, like this creative that regenerates, like for A/B testing or otherwise, are either like contextualized, or wrapped with the like reasoning behind why it might be doing what it's doing.
Right.
And that's like you said, that the why question is a lifetime value add to a brand overall, because maybe what works with a PMAX today or like an Advantage Plus today, it's very hard for a brand to know what worked and why it worked and what happened, and what happened under the hood. But if you're able to bring that piece of insights to a brand or otherwise, that's life, that's information, that's knowledge that is valuable to them, for a lifetime. So like the reasoning piece that these technologies of now are able to bring.
The reason why I kind of added the value of kind of explaining, I feel like 80% of my job as a performance marketer is explaining and teaching. You'd think it's about performance, but it's really about the why. So it's I'm just thinking of the storytelling aspect of SaaS, of any technology. It's understanding the why.
Like, why is it a bad idea to shut down your business?
AI is a tempest.
You're paying me for this. I'm gonna be nice to you. Where's my screen pillow when I need it?
I think it's because marketing as a function is maybe a lot of marketers are quite still emotional based in their approach.
Yes.
Whereas maybe a developer or a data scientist is a bit more on the logic.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think marketers are emotionally based?
Well, because marketing as a discipline, this is my opinion, is subjective. We're trying to influence perception, which you can use logic, but
so they're trying to influence someone else's perception,
right?
And then they're also influenced by their own.
That's the challenge
to do that.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe it's a bit due to, I don't know, maybe not enough background knowledge of how the technologies and things work? Yeah. So all they're left with is,
if someone isn't technical,
their intuition.
They can't go too far into kind of.
Maybe this is the gap. Really, is that there's actually an educational gap in how things work.
Well, this is why my SaaS idea,
I
think might be valuable.
Right.
We can talk about it off about Morphiq, but
viewers stay in there.
And I'm only saying that because I'm just like technology and it's building features. It's great, but also there's the what does your ICP actually value? because there's a value that they think they value, which is performance, but then the subconscious, how do they make the decisions? This is where I'm kind of thinking a bit deeper. How would you position a SaaS? And
I guess, like you said, I mean, it feels like a little bit of, even in the space of data science, the idea of something being an art and a science. So like marketing, maybe before any of the statistical paradigms were invented, was considered to be an art, I presume, like in the when it was conceived. The science pieces have only maybe come in to help answer a lot of questions on, hey, why is it working, why does it not work, or whatever. But in essence, it was it's supposed to be an artistic view of a story to a person, and at the right time at the end of the day. So maybe that's the paradigm that the market has come from. Now you can answer a lot of the questions that you might have with data. So maybe there's a bit of
a kind of swing of the pendulum. It'll be technical or still subjective. There's no through line yet.
Yeah,
which is kind of exciting because
yeah.
Because if you're pitching Morphiq to someone technical, it's an easy thing. But someone who isn't quite in tune with AI and algorithms, like we need to know the why too. In terms of what it sees as this is a good performing creative, is it purely based off the ad network's attribution model? So it just gets passed along, and this creative has 10 conversions, has lower cost per acquisition. This is a good creative. Is that kind of how you define what a good creative is?
So I mean, I'm going to give you an example of how people are actually consuming it. That might be a better help. So what they generally use it as when it's running on like autopilot, let's say, is if it's optimizing, like one of our campaigns optimizes for cost per lead. So they essentially want to make sure that no point in time the cost per lead goes above like £70 or something like that per lead. So at any point in time, any of their campaigns, and this one's across maybe 150 of them, any point in time, any of one of them goes over the assistant, the agent swings into action, brings up that flags that plugs up the creative, in this case, the headline descriptors, if depending on what they'd like changed, and presents that as an alternative, saying, hey, this campaign has gone over your 80 your £70 threshold. Here's what I suggest as an alternative. Here's what I think it might work. Okay. So in its autopilot mode, that's basically that's essentially what it's doing. So it's bringing in a better alternative to something that is not working, and then seeding your campaign with that, to then continue running with that in the future. So that becomes one of the key elements of the campaign,
right.
And then beyond
that, as a baseline.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So then it's already doing better than the predecessor.
Yeah.
But then it also becomes a baseline for where your campaign can go from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So in essence, it's very straightforward. Just follows a campaign, does what you told it to do. If you told it to do anything, if not, it kind of works in autopilot.
Right.
Just course correcting your campaigns based on the KPI. So it could be CP or otherwise.
Yeah.
So that's it's very straightforward from that perspective.
Yeah.
No crazy business, no funny business. And at the end of the day, it's always
great. Yeah.
If it works, it works. It doesn't need to be complicated.
It kind of sounds like, the extension of any other automated campaign type, but on the creative level.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
To some extent, yeah. And whenever these creatives are going in, they're also positively or negatively reinforcing the AI. So if whatever got put out didn't work for any reason, doesn't happen. But if it didn't, the AI would never produce it again. The agent would never produce it again.
Right.
So if it worked, it positively reinforces the agent with that learning. So at all points in time, you're basically making that LLM your own. Because you're reinforcing it every point of the A/B testing. So
so it really is evolving.
It's
really gets better as it gets to know you and your business and all that.
So it becomes better and better as it goes along.
All right, cool. So closing off, gonna get a bit more personal. If you were starting your journey again, you can take it from an angle of entrepreneurship or data science. Would you approach anything differently, and if so, what would that be?
I think that probably my key learning from these past years is maybe been something we touched upon a bit earlier, which is that most things, most advice you hear, or like past founders you listen to, or like any golden nugget of information always comes from a good place. Mostly comes from a good place. There are people out there that may not want you to succeed, though there are very few of them, but most of them give you advice with your best interests in mind. At the same time, advice is always contextual. So it comes from what may have worked for them in whatever different context and what they did. So I think it's great to always listen, but at the end of the day, contextualize it like from your own perspective in terms of where you are, and then try to use your guts as you always do with everything in life. Trust your guts to make whatever you like from that. That's been my like key learning, and outside of that, generally. Maybe being able to work with cool people like you at much earlier in life. Always surround yourself with people who you can maybe draw inspiration from, and who you can also help in a good way. That would probably be the only things that I might do differently.
Right. Final question. Any predictions in the world of AI?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's interesting because the whole LLM paradigm is so overpowering and all encompassing that we sort of forget that it's one piece of the whole idea of being able to. What we're hoping for from technology is to make our lives easier, help us get from A to B faster, cheaper, spend less time and energy on it. So AI is one piece of that entire puzzle. LLMs are one piece of that puzzle. Today maybe we use them, as a for a question prompting machine, whatever you like to call it. Tomorrow they might disappear from that perspective. They might entirely operate under the hood. A piece of advice that I always listen to, what has been the guiding force through my entire career is a researcher called Mark Wiseman, I think. I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, he had a very interesting quote saying that the most profound technologies are those that disappear, and they weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life till they become indistinguishable from it. I think that most of these technologies would disappear under the hood. They would empower our A to B journeys, but not essentially being always on the surface. LLMs are one step in that direction. They exist today. Tomorrow you might have another piece of another AI model that will do better than that. But at the end of the day, they will probably disappear under the hood and do a lot of their magic. Maybe without us even asking them to do that, and that would be a really cool future. I remember discussing with somebody another a VC friend of mine about the idea of maybe websites that generate on the fly, knowing the kind of person that they're in front of. That would be really cool. I don't know if that's that's
scary.
Scary too, but again, I guess all of these technologies depend on how you use them, but stuff that can generate on the fly with best intentions in mind.
Right.
Maybe that is one future. Being able to cure the different diseases that we are not able to get to at this point in time. That's also an incredibly exciting paradigm. I think the future is really bright, and again maybe we've hopefully made the right decisions to get us to this point so far, and I'm confident, despite the current landscape, that in the long run we'll continue to make the right calls in the future.
That's good. Right. Thank you so much, Ankuj, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. It's a bright sunny day.
Yeah, beautiful
And,
day.
Thank you for tagging along.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Cool. All right.